Stocks, currencies, bonds, commodities. The stock market has become a giant casino where traders are buying and selling non-stop. With each transaction, the objective remains the same: to make money. In a system where millions of dollars are exchanged daily, an intuition can lead to a jackpot or a total loss in a matter of seconds. This constant risk-taking puts traders under a permanent state of emotional pressure.
Definitely different feeling and emotions, and it must have an effect on my trading.
Trading is almost all psychological. We fear loss and we want to make lots of money.
When you're exchanging millions of dollars in a market, it's exhausting, and that plays on your emotions.
When you're doing that, and what it feels like is that you're under the influence of a narcotic.
Through a new science called neuroeconomics, we can study what propels the choices of these powerful masterminds. Can hormones or emotions obscure traders' clarity? Are recessions a result of their irrational behavior? Is the human factor the weakest link in the world economy? Deep amongst the skyscrapers of the British capital, in the financial district known as the City, we find the London Stock Exchange, the first financial center in the world before New York and Tokyo. Each day, millions of transactions occur in these high-tech trading rooms. Central Markets is one of the many trading firms here. The market seems calm this morning, but the tension is undeniable. Behind their screens, the traders scan the stocks and survey their portfolios. They're on the lookout for even the slightest opportunity. Their mission? Buy low, sell high, to grow their clients' assets. To make money is the motto of the financial world. Darren Courtney Cook is the head of trading for Central Markets and oversees 60 traders. With more than 15 years of experience in the frenzy of the trading floor, he has learned to keep his cool in all circumstances.
My job is taking risk every day. Every day is different. Every day is a blank piece of paper. So following a good day, it could be another good day or it could be a bad day, and your emotions reset because you just don't know what the market is going to give you. There's no crystal ball.
Despite his experience, each day holds uncertainty. He must constantly weigh the pros and cons of each transaction and make the right decision in a matter of seconds. When the market in London closes, the one in New York is still running, and then not long after, the Asian markets will open. The financial world never stops spinning.
It never stops. It never stops. I have a smartphone when I'm on the train. I'm looking at prices and aware of what's going on. And things can change very quickly. You can be sitting here and be profitable. The market moves very quickly, and suddenly you're losing a lot of money.
When making money, the traders are applauded, adored, and the firms deemed as brilliant. But sometimes Even the most powerful can crash abruptly.
Is your money safe? The fall of Lehman Brothers.
You are looking at a live picture of Lehman Brothers' 158-year-old firm, born pre-industrial.
On September 14, 2008, the fourth largest American investment firm, the Lehman Brothers, went bankrupt. A few days after, the other giants of Wall Street followed suit. Merrill Lynch, AIG, Goldman Sachs, the most powerful banks and insurance companies collapsed. Euphoria gave way to panic on the trading floor. The stock market crashed and the world spiraled into one of the worst economic crises in history. In the heart of the storm, certain traders become highly stigmatized. Jerome Kerviel of Societe Generale, Keku Adeboli of UBS, and Bruno Ixiel, nicknamed the London Whale of JP Morgan, all suffered billions of dollars in losses. Their names spread like wildfire in the international press. They became known as the rogue traders. These modern speculators point out an essential yet concealed part of the market frenzy. Despite the ultra-sophisticated computers and software programs, man is still at the center of global finance. Faced with the relentless pressure of the market, the human mind is far from being infallible.
A trader, if he loses money, everyone's could have done better, you know, without really knowing what's gone on or the reasons for losing the money.
How do traders make these mistakes? What are their reasons for making irrational decisions and taking foolish risks? In the 1970s, the American psychologist Daniel Kahneman conducted numerous studies concerning these questions. His research earned him the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2002. He concludes that traders don't make consistent logical decisions, but are rather incessantly influenced by numerous psychological factors affecting their risk perception.
Daniel Kahneman a permis de montrer qu'il existait.
Daniel Kahneman has shown that there are many elements to consider when looking at the decisions that are made in any given situation. The scenario of a market doesn't boil down to the interest of one individual or of market variables. There's the price and the quantities. There are other dimensions that influence human psychology and therefore decisions made by individuals.
In marketing, psychological factors are extremely important in selling products, whereas they are hardly considered in economics.
Recent economic news events have certainly shown that the study of economics has mistaken the importance of psychological factors. Understanding the human factor and the psychological dimension of decision-making is just as important in the functioning of the economy as it is to understand consumer behavior.
Driven by the theories of Daniel Kahneman, a new discipline emerged: experimental economics. Its objective? To better understand the human factor impact in economic behavior, especially in financial markets. In the last few years, economic science has been transferred from the trading floor to laboratories around the world. In Lyon, the analysis group of economic theory called Legat is one of the most prestigious experimental economic laboratories in France. The director, Marie-Claire Vival, is an internationally recognized experimentalist. Today, she has asked a group of students to become traders. The game is simple. Each volunteer has a portfolio of shares and a virtual sum of money on their computer. The objective, to buy and sell shares and to earn as much money as possible. The volunteers are free to set their own prices based on supply and demand, while a reference rate is also arbitrarily set by the researchers. All of these apprentice traders react the same way, buying and selling their shares close to the reference rate, slightly below or slightly above. The market price doesn't collapse or peak, and the market remains stable in line with economic forecasts. But Marie-Claire Vivalde and her team suddenly introduce a new rule to the game. Now, at the end of each trading period, the 3 best players that have gained the most money will receive a bonus. The competition begins. The effect is immediate. The trading intensifies and the share prices soar above the reference rate. They climb throughout the entire exercise before diving sharply at the end. A true speculative bubble is suddenly formed.
The volunteers are aware of the fluctuating value of their assets. They understand it early on with the short-term bonus, and we see that magnificent bubble form. The market price soars above the norm, quickly and consistently. They are all concentrated on the price growth.
Put up against one another, the participants try to win the bonus and therefore speculate disproportionately. The emergence of this financial bubble creates the spirit of competition.
As the competition is introduced between the traders, they increase the value of their shares, purchase more shares, raise their prices, and follow the prices that continue to rise. They piggyback onto this herding phenomenon. As they watch other prices climb, they raise their own. And an incredible enthusiasm is created in the market, whereby trying to obtain the bonus, everyone speculates more.
In real trading rooms, it's the same thing. The competition between traders is unending. The infamous bonus is at stake, but that's not all.
It's a struggle, a fight actually. We're going to try to make the most money, to be better than the others, to have a few extra points that will make all the difference.
Jérôme Réveillé entered the financial market 8 years ago. Aeronautical engineer by training, he now privately manages a portfolio of several $1 million. He has chosen to remain independent, staying away from the large trading rooms of the city.
You have 15, 20, 30 traders in the same room who have to achieve the maximum of results. Sure, at some point the ego, the desire to be the best, takes over. Except the effect is enhanced by the notion of trading, which by nature already pushes people to their limits. We're talking about money, millions and billions of dollars that's going to propel the already frantic competition.
Like pro athletes, traders are true competitors. But how far will they go to win at all costs? What risks are they willing to take? In Rennes, France, professor of economy, Laurent Denon-Bohémond directs an experimental laboratory with Olivier Laredoux, a renowned expert in behavioral economy. For several years, they have been measuring one particular human element, risk appetite. To do this, they have asked volunteers to choose between two different lottery games, one with a guaranteed moderate win, or another with an uncertain but greater win.
Would you prefer a 100% chance to win $100 or a 50% chance to win $150?
The researchers vary the amount and winning probability with each lottery.
Would you prefer a 100% chance to win $100 or a 50% chance to win $200? Or a 100% chance to win $100 or a 30% chance to win $200? Would you prefer a 100% chance to win $50 or a 30% chance to win $200?
With each experiment, the findings are the same. The majority of participants choose the lottery with the smaller but guaranteed win. It seems that people tend to avoid situations that appear too risky.
Man doesn't like risk on average. Most people try to avoid it.
But this natural reluctance toward risk is easily eclipsed by another phenomenon. For this experiment, the rules are changed. The participants will no longer make money. Instead, they will lose.
Would you prefer a 100% chance to lose $100 or a 50% chance to lose $150?
The result? People are willing to take serious risks to avoid losing money.
People hate to lose. We estimate that during an experiment, they weigh the loss 2 to 3 times per the gain. This means that to compensate a loss, they need 2 to 3 times equivalent to gain. There's extreme aversion to loss.
This profound fear of loss has an unexpected consequence in classic economic theory. In a situation of financial loss, anyone could become a risk taker.
In this case, surprisingly, the attitude towards risk is reversed. People seek the risk. They are ready to lose much more, to have the chance to lose much less or nothing at all. This situation can become totally irrational from the moment we start to take more risk to avoid more loss. And as the losses accumulate, we tend to take even more risk to cover the loss.
Taking risk to rebuild costs. For traders, their greatest danger are the decisions they make in times of loss.
If I've lost money in a day, I will work later, I will work longer, and with that, it's not good because you're fatigued. I've been here since 6:30 in the morning, but because I'm trying to make money back that I've lost. When I've had a good day, I want to lock in the profits for the investor, whereas when I've had a bad day, I want to make it back. So yeah, definitely the emotions do kick in, and they are very different from being profitable and up and being down. Yeah.
Certain behavior in the trading room and certain excessive risk-taking is ultimately related to the trader's feelings, to their emotions, psychological state, even their mood that day.
The day where you're in a bad mood, or where there's too much stuff going on in your life, it's guaranteed to be a bad day.
What is going on inside the body that pushes traders to be susceptible to their emotions? What drives any of us to take more risk in certain situations? Back in Lyon, we enter the laboratory of GATT. Marie-Claire Vival is conducting a new experiment to see what the human eye cannot. Reactions inside the body.
I'm going to place these electrodes here, so now we can actually measure the perspiration. It's not painful. There's absolutely no risk.
Similar to a lie detector test, these electrodes measure the electrical changes in the skin's surface. The variations essentially show the small differences in sweat secretion. The participants are given a choice. After receiving a sum of money, they can either declare it to the tax authorities or they can attempt to conceal it. In other words, they are offered the possibility of tax evasion. But the threat is heavy. At the end of each session, the tax evader may be monitored and would have to pay a large fine. Certain participants, like this one, never defraud. For others, it's the opposite. They try to evade paying anything. The researchers find that these tax evaders reach an emotional peak just before they make their decision. They sweat harder.
What's interesting to see is that the people who are the most emotional evade the most. It means that there's an anticipatory element to our emotions that we feel as we're making our choice. These anticipations create emotions. We see that the more intense the emotion, the more likely that person is to commit fraud.
Shortly after, these tax evaders experience a second emotional peak. It occurs precisely when they discover that they are being monitored or that their tax evasion was a success.
If you find out that you weren't monitored and that you've fraudulently acquired a lot of money, it's possible that you'll feel extremely satisfied in the moment, and that's going to ultimately encourage you to risk again in the future. These emotions contribute to a learning process and will have an effect on your economic behavior.
Just as they do in our everyday lives, emotions play a central role in our economic choices. The more emotional the trader, the more prone to risky behavior. With each success, the desire to continue to risk is reinforced, and with hopes of winning bigger each time. On the trading floors across the globe, this is just the kind of vicious spiral that threatens a trader's euphoria. John Coates, a former Wall Street trader, remembers perfectly how he felt when winning big during the peak of the financial bubble.
When I was on a winning streak, when I was making above average profits, like I was really doing well and expecting an above average bonus, I too felt these symptoms. I knew that I carried myself like a superhero. I felt like no thought I could think could be wrong. Nothing I could do would turn out badly. And you become dangerous because you believe you can't do anything wrong. Your trades get bigger and bigger. And the risk-reward trade-offs for the trades gets worse and worse.
He knew this feeling of invincibility couldn't just be psychological. There was a visceral, biological reaction, something no human being could resist.
And what it feels like is that you're under the influence of a narcotic. And I thought that was incredibly important. It felt like our body was producing some chemical that was changing us. It was like a Midsummer Night's Dream. You know, the night comes, people go crazy, they swap partners, which of course happens during a bull market. You know, people are making so much money, they want to like leave their wives and move on to something else. I mean, it's just like a Shakespearean night. And then when the market crashes and people wake up to reality, they're just like, you know, the characters in Midsummer Night's Dream the next day. They're holding their head in their hands going, how could I have been so stupid? So this really seemed like narcotic behavior to me.
It was about 10 years ago that John Coates decided to quit the craze of the stock market. He turned in his investment portfolio for a set of measuring instruments to become a neuroeconomist. His former colleagues become the subjects of his research. Under the microscope, he observed the behavior of nearly 200 financial professionals from the same trading floor. It was the first study of its kind in what is a very closed-off environment. Recently, he has been concentrating on something specific: the level of hormones contained in the saliva of financial traders. The results quickly spread throughout the globe. The level of the male sexual hormone testosterone plays a key role in the risk-taking in the stock market.
Rising levels of testosterone drive irrational exuberance, drive increased risk-taking. We did observe that baseline testosterone levels were correlated or did predict the levels of risk that the traders were taking.
The more testosterone someone produces, the more they are inclined to make a risky bet. On the trading floors of the city, Wall Street, and Tokyo, the traders are often young men and in the prime of their life. They are producing testosterone at a maximum level. Is the global economy being managed by a group of dominant young men under the influence of their hormones? In certain situations, can this overload of testosterone make some traders go crazy? For Jean-Jacques Lejeune, a former trader, this hypothesis may be right.
On prend des jeunes hommes avec un ego assez affirmé.
We take these young guys with big egos, typically chosen for their analytical capabilities, and they usually have a healthy dose of testosterone.
Parmi cette population, vous allez avoir,
so within this group, you're going to sometimes have that famous mad trader, and it's going to happen that you'll see irrational behavior.
Irrationnel au sein de cet endroit.
The secrets of the traders' behavior is gradually revealed. Their greed, their emotions generated by risk-taking, and most of all, their visceral fear of losing all, contribute to how they make their decisions. Their hormones only reinforce this phenomenon. But to better understand the psychological and physiological mechanisms, we have to look deeper inside the human body and enter the brain. Inside the cerebral cortex lies the source of all our daily actions, from our most simple movements to our most complicated thoughts, our childhood memories and our feelings today. It's all controlled by the billions of entangled neurons that cover the skull. Even financial decisions, a trader's choice to buy or sell, to take a risk or remain cautious. For a long time, the human brain remained a mystery to the scientific community. But over the past 10 years, sophisticated imaging devices have been developed that allow us to observe the brain in action. Here in Lyon, France, we enter at the Institute of Cognitive Science, a prestigious center for research and neurosciences. Jean-Claude Dreyer and his team of students are studying a specific phenomenon, the brain's reactions after winning. Individuals are placed in front of slot machines under imaging devices. There's no risk-taking. They aren't given any money to gamble. Instead, they are merely waiting to see if they fall upon a winning combination. 3 types of prizes are randomly distributed: a sum of money, food, or an erotic image. On their screens in real time, the researchers measure the brain's reactions. They make an initial observation. In the result of a victory, 3 sections of the brain are specifically activated: the amygdala, the striatum, and the part of the prefrontal cortex located between the eyes. These zones are widely known by specialists to be associated with the sensation of pleasure. The results show that winning sends a rush of good feelings through the head. They also make a surprising discovery. The activated zones are identical regardless of the nature of the prize. Money, food, or sex. The effect is the same.
Whether it's for money or another award, such as an erotic stimuli or food, for example, there is a system that's called the reward system that is regulated by a molecule called dopamine. This system is an old one.
Throughout evolution, feeling enriched has become just as important and gratifying as eating and reproducing. The neural circuit connected to this phenomenon is what scientists have named the reward system, which involves the very famous molecule dopamine, also known as the pleasure chemical. With each positive result, dopamine is released by neurons in the back of our brains and then spreads amongst the amygdala, striatum, and prefrontal cortex. These zones trigger a feel-good wave throughout the rest of the brain and body. The bigger the win, the more dopamine released. It's this process that can propel a trader into a state of total exhilaration.
When you win $50, $100, $200,000 in a few minutes, that's a lot of money in a small amount of time. There's a certain kind of satisfaction, a feeling that's exhilarating. The thing is to know how to manage it. There's unfortunately a downward spiral that happens to most people, though. It's when they want to win more than the time before. Say you win a lot on the first or second try. There's this incredible euphoria that comes over you. If we're not careful, we can quickly tumble into that downward spiral of taking more and more risk, all to win more.
Playing to win more each time activates the reward system of the brain. Successive wins result in an increased release of dopamine, and the testosterone produced by young men only intensifies the production of this pleasure molecule. It's an addictive state of mind, to say the least. For neuroscientist Matthias Pisiglione, a specialist in motivational brain behavior, this brain mechanism could explain the nearly uncontrollable attraction towards risk that overwhelms some traders.
Dopamine reinforces the actions that result in reward. It's a simple mechanism. This might explain addiction in all types of behaviors that give in the pleasure. Whether it's drugs or compulsive shopping, it's the type of addiction that can happen in traders, even if they're just winning here and there. These occasional wins will trigger these dopamine rushes and will encourage their behavior.
After experiencing this rush, it's hard to do without. And I know lots of traders who try to give it up but can't help but keep at least some small account somewhere to keep it going. Because it's exhilarating. I have to say it's exhilarating. And it's what's going to cause the losses for a lot of people in the market. There's something addicting, something powerful that will continue to push you and make you dependent on it.
When I started the studies on the trading floor, so I was back on a trading floor, but not as a trader, and I heard all the familiar sounds of the trading floor, it was almost irresistible I was sort of holding my hand back from picking up the phone and placing a trade.
But in our endless quest for pleasure, our brain offers another major influence, irrational and unconscious fear. Zurich, the dynamic global city of northeastern Switzerland. It's a banking paradise and is the home of the 6th largest stock market in the world. Finance has long been the pillars of the city's economy. In the basement of a hospital, a special laboratory has recently opened. The SNS Lab, founded by Ernst Fürn, a worldwide renowned economist. He believes that traders' decisions are influenced greatly by their emotions, no matter the amount of money at stake.
They are human beings, you see, and they are subject to irrational impulses like any other human being. There's some emotions that are guiding our decision-making in a very rational way. What's irrational is when there are emotions that are irrelevant for my experienced value, but they play a role at the time of decision-making. Like when I was angry before I made the decision, then that anger should not color my decision, but it does. Or when I'm under the threat, under some danger. I saw that. So, what did you get?
For several months, Ernst Fehr and Christian Ruff, the laboratory director, have been conducting shocking experiments to better understand how stress and fear influence our decision-making. In one of the experiments, the volunteers play a typical gambling game while placed under an MRI. But before they can even make their choices and decide to bet or not, a screen flashes in front of them. If it's blue, nothing happens. But if it's green, it indicates that they will receive an electric shock at the end of the game. The shock is small but painful, and most importantly, it will be administered regardless if they win or lose.
They don't actually get many shocks, but they know in certain conditions where the screen has a particular color, it is possible that they're going to get shocked very strongly, and it's quite painful. And we can measure by their skin conductance, for instance, that they really are quite anxious when they know that they might get shocked. And we then measure their financial risk-taking behavior. So we're quite interested in finding out how does the brain value things and value risks in particular when you're in a tense, anxious state versus when you're in a relaxed state.
Two zones of the brain are activated during this stressful game. The amygdala, which represents both positive and negative emotions, and the anterior insula, which is linked to the feeling of disgust. Under these conditions, the participants are much more likely to take risks. Even though the shock is totally random and unrelated to their performance, the threat of it puts them in a trance. They just want to finish and get themselves out of this terrible situation as quickly as possible. The stress has made them incapable of making good decisions.
That danger at the time of decision-making affects my decision-making, even though it has no impact whatsoever. A threat of shock is a pretty strong emotional stimulus, and it activates the anterior insula very strongly. And it's kind of a loss. You see, it's the threat of a loss. And so these emotional components play a big role in risk-taking.
In trading environments, there's lots of stress and pressure. How does such stress and pressure, such background emotions, how does that influence our choices? The finding so far is that when you're relaxed, your brain encodes much more the positive things. What can you possibly win? Whereas as soon as you switch, on a trial-by-trial basis, really, to a negative anxious state, your brain focuses much more on what you could possibly lose, so the negative consequences.
To play or not to play, fight or flee. Our behavior is the result of our subconscious reactions, the inherent impulses of our brain. But despite these emotional reflexes, humans possess a safeguard: reason. To uncover exactly where our analytical ability lies inside our brain, Christian Ruff has developed an unusual method based on neurostimulation. He uses electrical pulses to activate specific neurons.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to localize the area in your brain that we want to stimulate today. For that, you would have to put up these glasses, please.
The technique is non-invasive and generally non-painful. Using a pointer, he starts by localizing a specific area of the brain in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This zone is believed to be connected with conscious decision-making.
Perfect. Okay, we have it.
Then a unique apparatus is installed. It generates a carefully controlled magnetic field, which will literally numb the neuron.
Okay, we're starting now.
The dorsolateral cortex is now entirely inoperative for a few minutes. This is when the researchers ask a series of financial questions in several different contexts. The result: without the use of their dorsolateral cortex, the participants appear to be even more sensitive to loss. In an attempt to get out of the situation, they take even more risks than they would normally if they had 100% brain capacity.
The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex may actually influence these automatic emotional responses in order to allow people to overcome these emotional states, right? And to basically accept that a certain loss is better in this case than taking a risk. So it's not just the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that we think is driving behavior, but it's more the influence that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex might have on these emotional areas, such as the amygdala and the insula.
By influencing the instinctual reactions of the brain, this region of the cortex could be considered the command center for decision-making. It's like a cognitive shield that prevents us from being controlled by our impulses.
We can perhaps think of the brain like an orchestra. So there's different special brain areas that each have a particular function, like instruments in an orchestra. They all have distinctive sounds. And in the brain, it's similar. On the one hand, there's the brain reward system. This is the system that basically encodes what's valuable to us, what's rewarding to us. And then there's also other brain areas that encode emotional states that are constantly active, trying to evaluate everything that's happening out there in the world. And these are basically all areas that you might say encode somewhat automatic impulses, emotional impulses. On the other hand, we have areas of the outer surface of the brain that control the brain function in line with what we've learned, with our conscious experience. And all of these different areas, like in an orchestra, basically need to play together and form one coherent state of the brain. And we can think that sometimes there's a competition. Our emotions can influence what we think, but we can also influence our emotions by what we're thinking. And ultimately, the brain tries to assign one specific value to each option and then choose from this list of options with their values the one that seems most attractive.
The brain essentially has two complementary systems of thinking. One, quick and automatic, based on our emotion. The other, more reason-oriented, evaluating in detail the possible consequences of our decisions. But caught in the frenzy of the trading floor, this process of consciousness proves too slow and useless. Therefore, feeling usually trumps reason.
In a trading floor, decisions need to be taken very quickly. They need to be taken often based on limited information, and they're taken in a competitive setting. Here, of course, it's hard to take decisions in a, say, careful and slow manner. Our brain might not even have the time to represent every possible complex aspect that goes with a decision to buy or to sell.
A visceral fear of losing and a consuming desire to win. Rob Hoffman, a trading professor based in Chicago, claims that these two reflexes are the two greatest enemies of traders playing the stock market, whether you're a professional or not.
Emotions that really drive the market are fear and greed. We fear loss, and we want to make lots of money. And I see even, I see gamblers, people that like to play poker, casinos. I see people like this want to get into the markets because they see lots of money can be made very fast, but they don't think about the loss that can happen, or they think it won't happen to me. I'm better than the market.
What's horrible with stories like with Kerviel at Société Générale and others is that it's a classic pattern for lots of people. Even someone with $5,000 or $10,000 in their equity savings plan can fall into the same trap. Meaning they take a position, fall in love, and then they're not able to get out because they don't want to admit they made a mistake. And then they're just stuck in this downward spiral. It's the biggest threat to anyone.
Mankind is somewhat programmed to make mistakes in stressful situations, as if our biological makeup is not appropriate in the context of a stock market. This is precisely the theory of Sacha Bourgeois-Giron, professor and neuroeconomist at the University of Panthéon-Assas in Paris. He believes that our brain hasn't had enough time to adapt to the modern economy.
Currency appeared nearly 7,000 years ago, which is nothing compared to the perspective of brain evolution. Finance markets haven't been around that long. They're only 20 years old in their contemporary form. It's a rather recent thing. We know that our brain has learned to evolve over millions of years. It is adapted to many different environments. The dangers of predation, of domination, the brain has remained aware, but it must also adapt to modern forms of decision-making. How can it adapt to that, knowing that it's a small period of time and there's no possibility of anatomical change in the brain? It takes a long time, not 7,000 years, but much, much more. Financial markets are places of competition, predators, hunting, killing, in a metaphorical sense, but not completely metaphorical. I tend to believe that there's a form of cortical cultural recycling, meaning that cultural environments have influenced our brains to recycle old, adaptive, cerebral recourses from past environments to use towards new environments.
Far from being a Homo economicus, the trader is above all a Homo sapien, immersed in a hostile environment, compelled to take risks and prone to addiction. Given this somewhat weak human assessment, a tempting solution might be to replace traders with computers. However, even machines have their limits, and it seems impossible to remove human control completely from the markets. There will always be traders on the trading floor. So how do we improve their performance? How to avoid abuse in the market and ensure rational decision-making? Science has been making great strides in understanding the brain, and the concept to artificially manipulate man is already in place.
In the military in certain states, there's a lot of interest in neurostimulation, in particular to enable soldiers to take the right decisions in particular situations. With respect to traders, I mean, technically, I think it would be possible to influence brains in a way that decisions are taken in a particular style. This is what our experiments are about. There are people thinking about the future who start predicting that humans might become more and more bionic.
Bionic traders with electrodes screwed into their skulls is not yet a reality. Instead of modifying men, some argue that it's the work environment that needs a total overhaul.
Qu'est-ce qui est le plus flexible? What's the most flexible? Is it our biological makeup or our economic environment in which we live? Should we change the nature of man, or should we readapt our environments politically, socially, and economically so that we can ultimately be the most efficient possible in these modified environments?
Humanizing the codes of the financial markets. The initial results of neuroeconomic studies lay the foundation for a new market theory where man is keystone. On the individual level, traders must become better trained to handle their emotions.
More than an asset manager, I'm almost more a human emotions manager. We work as rigorously as possible, but even with experience, it takes a lot of work, each week, each month, to stay on the right path.
Discipline and risk management, that would make a good trader.
Banks and trading firms need to review the culture of the trading floor and, above all, modify the allocation of bonuses.
Companies need to have an architecture of primes that directs people in the right way so that they don't make mistakes that lead to these huge losses that sometimes happen from rogue traders and so on.
Despite the stock market crash of 2008, no new regulation has been put into place. Yet neuroeconomists seem unanimous. If nothing is done, another global financial crisis could strike at any moment.